I was sitting in my apartment long after midnight, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room. On the screen was a contract worth $120 million, the kind of document that normally belongs locked in a fireproof cabinet under triple security. But this one sat open on my kitchen table, and I couldn't stop reading the same line over and over. Valid only upon counter-signature of original architect. My name. My clause. That one sentence was more powerful than any title or office badge I ever carried, without my signature. Their grand deal was nothing but paper, and Derek Sloan, my former boss, self-styled visionary and professional ego in a suit, had no idea. I'm Renee Callahan, 32 years old. 12 years of my life poured into a tech firm that believed I was dependable, detail-oriented, and safe enough to keep in the background. I built frameworks, rescued projects no one else could stabilize, and signed the very contracts that kept our largest client loyal for over a decade. I asked for nothing more than respect. Instead, I got Derek. He arrived with a smirk that could stain glass, talking about disruption like it was oxygen and dismissing everything that didn't sparkle under fluorescent lights. From the first day, he looked at me like I was a relic useful once, but better forgotten. And in his first leadership meeting, he proved it. I can still hear the words, sharp and polished, like he'd been saving them for the moment he wanted me smallest. I had challenged his half-baked strategy, pointed out the legal exposure, the regulatory choke points, the things experience teaches you to see. He leaned back, folded his arms, and smiled that perfect white-toothed grin. This is why women can't lead. The room went silent. HR avoided my eyes. A colleague coughed into his sleeve. That was it, no rebuttal, no defense. Just a sentence meant to erase 12 years in a breath. Minutes later, my badge was dead, my desk boxed up, and I was walking out with a succulent, a photo frame, and the sound of muffled laughter trailing behind me. What Derek didn't know was that he hadn't erased me at all. He'd left a fuse burning inside the very contract he was about to pitch, and that fuse was tied to my name. If they erased me so easily, why did my name still control their entire future? Derek Sloan was 38, the kind of man who thought charisma was a resume. He walked into the office like he owned the air itself, tossing buzzwords around as if they were currency. People whispered that his father's money paved the way, that the board gave him the CEO seat because of a last name, not a track record. To me, it was obvious from the start, nepotism in a tailored suit. He strutted through the floor with a confidence only ignorance could buy, pointing at desks like they were pawns on a board. Within a week, every woman on the team had been shuffled into corners near the janitor's closet or the coldest vents. He called it optimizing collaboration zones. We called it what it was, exile. My 12 years of work frameworks I'd built, contracts I'd secured, products I'd kept alive by patching code at 3 a.m. were dragged and dropped into a folder on the company's server labeled Legacy Clutter. That was his term, clutter. The word sat heavy in my chest. Every sacrifice I had made, reduced to digital garbage in a directory no one would ever open. I'd lived through layoffs, reorganizations, and 3 different CEOs. I had learned to swallow slights and let my work speak for itself. But Derek wasn't just insulting, he was reckless. He talked about disruption like it was gospel and ignored the cost written in the margins. I watched him from my desk as he hovered over the shared drive. The notifications lit up on my screen, access logs pinging, archived decks being opened one by one. He scrolled through old strategies like a scavenger, desperate for something shiny to pass off his vision. My stomach tightened, buried deep. 4 folders down was the document I'd sworn never to let anyone touch again. A strategy designed for a different market, A different era so dangerous I had branded it with red warnings and shoved it out of sight. Derek didn't know what he was looking at. To him, every file was potential glory. But to me, that one buried plan was a live grenade. What would happen if he mistook a grenade for a gold mine? The leadership meeting was supposed to be routine quarterly numbers, pipeline reviews, a few too many acronyms. I'd survived dozens of them. But this time, the air felt different, thinner somehow. Like everyone knew a storm was coming and I hadn't checked the weather. Derek sat at the head of the long walnut table, fingers steepled, eyes scanning the room as if he were auditioning for the role of visionary. The CFO cleared his throat. Slides flickered on the screen, but Derek barely glanced. He was waiting for his scene. When my turn came, I spoke the way I always had, steady, precise, outlining the risks tied to an aggressive expansion he was proposing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I laid out the data, the same way I'd done for 12 years. He let me finish 2 sentences before cutting me off. "We need vision, Renee," he said, leaning back like he was savoring a cigar I couldn't see. "And you're just process." He paused for effect, scanning the table. "This is why women can't lead." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were original, they weren't, but because no one in that room flinched. HR sat 2 seats away, tapping a tablet. My colleagues stared at their notepads as if the numbers might shield them. The silence was deafening, complicit. It was over in minutes. Derek slid a folder toward me, said HR would handle the rest. No review, no warning, no thank you. Just a sentence meant to reduce me to clutter. I walked out with a cardboard box, the framed team photo. A plant I knew would die within a week, a half-empty chapstick. My badge blinked red at the turnstile, the system erasing me as if I'd never existed. Inside the elevator, the shock held me still, like concrete poured around my ribs. Then, slowly, something colder replaced it. Rage, not loud, not fiery, but sharp and electric. You don't bury me, I thought. Watching the numbers descend, you just planted the wrong seed. When rage replaces grief, what grows in the silence left behind, I should have walked away and never looked back. But habit kept me checking the access logs long after my badge stopped working. Old instincts don't die easily. When you've spent a career watching for cracks in the system, you see the fractures even from a distance. That's how I knew Derek had found it, buried under 4 layers of folders. Past the sanitized slide decks and approved strategies was one document I'd sworn would never see daylight again: predator strategy. I wrote it 4 years earlier, back when our leadership thought bigger always meant better. It was bold, aggressive, designed for a client 3 times the size of our biggest account, and it was dangerous. I still remember the night I finished at 3 a.m. Empty office, fluorescent hum buzzing in my ears. I stamped warnings across every page: catastrophic exposure, high liability, use only with fallback structure. I had tucked it away like a loaded weapon, labeled in red, "Do not present," because I knew what it could do in the wrong hands. And Derek's hands were nothing if not wrong. He pulled the file like a kid unearthing buried treasure, too dazzled by the flashy graphs to notice the caution tape wrapped around it. A week later, I heard through the grapevine he was printing it in full color, rebranding the headers, swapping fonts, and stapling his name across the front. He strutted through the halls with it, tucked under his arm, telling anyone who'd listen about his visionary play. My colleagues nodded, some out of fear, some out of exhaustion. Nobody asked the obvious: why did a brand new CEO suddenly have a fully formed plan? Here's what Derek didn't know. Documents carry ghosts. Metadata doesn't vanish because you change the font or slap a logo on the corner. Every chart, every slide, still bore my digital fingerprint. My name was etched into the foundation, invisible to him but glaring to anyone who knew where to look. He thought he'd stolen gold. He was carrying a grenade with the pin already loose. How long can a thief shine when the watermark belongs to someone else, 2 days after the cardboard box exit? My apartment looked like a thrift store exploded. Half-unpacked boxes were stacked along the walls. The air still smelled of packing tape. And I was eating cereal straight from the box because I couldn't find a single clean bowl. I should have been mourning the end of 12 years, but all I felt was static, like my brain was 3 feet behind me watching someone else's life unravel. That's when my phone buzzed. At first I thought it was another recruiter circling like a vulture, eager to capitalize on the news of my departure. But the name on the screen froze me. Maya Brooks, CTO of our $120 million client, and before that, one of the few people who'd ever had my back. We hadn't spoken in years, not since we were 2 junior analysts huddled in freezing server rooms, laughing through fire drills, whispering jokes under the roar of cooling fans. We were the only women in the rotation then, sisters in survival suits. I remembered the look in her eyes on nights when we patched systems no one else understood. We may not belong here, but we're not going anywhere. Her message was short, just 12 words. He's about to bankrupt us. You free. I read it once, then twice, then 5 more times, as if the letters might rearrange into something less explosive. But no, Derek was pitching my deck, my numbers, my fingerprints, and Maya had recognized it instantly. Even the typo on slide 6, the one I left during an all-nighter 4 years ago and never fixed, Shamal footprint instead of channel footprint, a mistake no one else would notice. But she did, because she knew me. I sat cross-legged on the floor, cereal forgotten, staring at that message until the room blurred. Derek was about to sell them gasoline in a thunderstorm, and the only reason Maya reached out was because she trusted I could stop it. My hands hovered over the keyboard, torn between fury and temptation. I could let him fall on his own sword, or I could answer. Would I walk back into the fire or let Derek burn alone? The coffee shop was half empty, the kind of place where the chairs wobbled and the air smelled like burnt ambition and oat milk. I spotted Maya immediately. Same no-nonsense bun, same posture like steel under fabric, only sharper now, eyes burning with a fire I recognized. She didn't waste time. The second I slid into the booth across from her, she pushed a tablet toward me. On the screen, Derek's deck. My deck. Butchered and repackaged. The slides were polished, fonts changed, logos swapped, but the bones were mine. And staring back at me in bold letters was the typo I'd carried like a scar Shamal footprint. "Is this yours?" she asked. I nodded. It was until I buried it. I reached into my bag and pulled out my old company-issued laptop still in my possession because no one thought to ask for it back. I slid in a thumb drive, opened the folder, and there it was, the real predator strategy. 43 pages of warnings, annotations, red flags, and one very clear clause. Page 1. Valid only upon countersignature of original architect. My name, my signature, my safety net. Maya scrolled through, her fingers tightening on the cup she hadn't touched. He didn't show us any of this. He just called it bold growth. Bold, I shook my head. If you'd signed that, you'd be bleeding revenue in 18 months, maybe sooner. She leaned back, exhaled, then smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was calculation. Then be our ghost, a very loud ghost with receipts. The words slid across the table heavier than the tablet itself. She wasn't asking for friendship. She was offering me a way back in, not through Derek's door, but around him. I stared at the red flags glowing on the screen. 12 years of experience told me to walk away, to protect what little peace I had left. But another voice, sharper and colder, whispered, "You've already been erased. What's left to lose?" So I nodded. "I'll build you a roadmap, 90% of the upside, none of his recklessness." Maya's smirk was quick, fierce. "Good. Then let's cut the cord before the bomb goes off." Could I dismantle his deal quietly enough to save the 120 Mallers without saving him within 48 hours of that coffee shop meeting? I was no longer just Renee Callahan, ex-employee with a cardboard box. I was a ghost, written into fine print. The client's legal team moved faster than I expected. An email from a senior counsel named Elandre dropped into my inbox with a 5-page NDA attached. Every line was airtight, drafted by someone who had clearly done this before. I read it twice, signed once, and just like that, I was back in the game, but hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, Derek was parading around like he'd invented fire. Word reached me through the grapevine he'd booked an overpriced sushi lunch for the sales team, ordered champagne for his office, even asked facilities to find him an ice bucket stat. He called it his victory lap, bragging about the upsell of the decade. His smile was wide, his chest puffed out, but he had no idea the trapdoor beneath his feet was already groaning. The first crack came on Thursday morning. A simple, one-line email from procurement contract is now under review pending strategic clarification. That was it. No emojis, no reassurance, no timeline. Just a pause button slammed down hard. I imagined Derek's face when he read it, confusion tightening into panic. He responded with forced casualness, something about happy to clarify. Just let me know what you need. Smiley face with sunglasses. No reply. He tried again an hour later. This time, more urgent, Julia. Let's sync directly. I can explain any final tweaks. Silence. He called twice. Voicemail. By mid-afternoon, he was spiraling. He sent a third email, CCing half the C-suite, sprinkling in phrases like strategic alignment and final handshake. Still nothing. It was the sound of a man shouting into an empty canyon, and the echo was already folding back on him. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that behind the curtain, my rebuttal was already circulating through boardrooms like scripture. My roadmap, my risk assessments, my fallback clauses, all of it neatly packaged and stamped with the receipts Derek had tried to erase. Executives who had once dismissed me were now quoting my footnotes like they were gospel. I sat in my apartment. The same half-unpacked boxes still crowding the floor, watching emails roll in from Maya and her team. Every draft we refined was another nail in Derek's coffin. Every risk model I clarified was another spotlight shining on the blind spots he had ignored. It was surgical, precise, and strangely satisfying, like setting a broken bone back into place. Meanwhile, Derek's victory lap slowed to a crawl. Champagne sat sweating on his desk, untouched. The ice bucket melted into a puddle. His smile shrank with every hour of silence, but he still strutted through the halls as if sheer confidence could bend reality. He didn't realize that reality was already cracking beneath him, the beams splintering one by one. When the floor starts cracking, how long before the fall becomes free fall? Friday morning arrived with the weight of a gavel. The boardroom call was set for 9 sharp 2 companies, 36 executives, $120 million on the line. Derek showed up late, of course. His video feed flickered on with that fake office background he favored, head shimmering against a stock photo skyline. He grinned like he was about to deliver the Sermon on the Mount. "Apologies for the delay traffic," he said, as if anyone believed it. It was a Zoom meeting. The client's executives filled the screen in neat rows, all expensive fabrics and quiet authority. At the center was Julia Ortega, their CEO, known for a voice that never rose above a calm register, but still had the power to end careers. Beside her, Maya sat stone-faced, every expression measured. Derek launched into his performance. He clicked through slides like he was unveiling the cure for boredom. Speaking of aggressive expansion plays and disruption velocities, his voice carried the confidence of a man who thought charisma could substitute for competence. A few nods surfaced on the client's side, but mostly silence polite, calculating silence. Then Julia leaned forward, folding her hands. "Before we proceed," she said evenly, "there's a document we'd like to review, one that was notably absent during the initial proposal." Maya shared her screen, and there it was. Page 1 of the original contract, stamped with the clause Derek had never bothered to read, valid only with author's signature. The silence that followed was electric. You could feel it through the fiber optics, heavy and sharp, vibrating in your teeth. Julia spoke again. "This document was authored and maintained by..." She paused, eyes flicking toward me on the silent attendee list. "Renee Callahan." The metadata panel expanded on the screen, created by Renee Callahan. Last modified 4 years ago. Every warning, every red flag, every annotation still intact, my digital fingerprints glowing like neon. The camera caught Derek blinking too fast, the first crack in his polished veneer. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Well, we didn't think those notes were relevant for this client." Julia cut him off, her tone still calm. "Mr. Sloan, were you aware of this clause when you pitched on the other side of the table?" Derek's CEO shifted uncomfortably, collar dampening with sweat. "We should have disclosed that." No one looked at Derek again, and then Maya did something I didn't expect. She turned her camera on me. "This is Renee," she said, voice clipped but clear. "She's been consulting with us directly." Dozens of eyes shifted in unison, some widening, some narrowing, but none indifferent. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My name was already etched across the evidence. Derek slumped back, smaller than I'd ever seen him, his spotlight extinguished. From the center of the stage, he faded into the shadows, a man exposed as nothing more than borrowed shine, what's left of a man who built his power on someone else's name. It didn't take long for the dam to break. By Monday morning, Derek was no longer CEO in practice, just a man with a cardboard box and a hollow title waiting to be stripped. HR dressed it up as leadership restructuring, but no one was fooled. I heard he'd been escorted out by security, his designer blazer wrinkled, face pale, clutching the remnants of his office life like driftwood. In the executive parking lot, his black Audi sat hooked to a tow truck, hazard lights blinking. That vanity plate he loved so much, a rolling billboard for his ego, was lifted off the asphalt like a trophy in reverse. He looked smaller then, sagging under the fluorescent lights of humiliation. No champagne, no victory lap, just silence and the sound of metal chains tightening, while Derek unraveled. My world shifted. Julia extended an offer without preamble, the way you hand over something inevitable. Head of Strategic Innovation, reporting directly to the CEO, full autonomy, equity options, no middle management noise. It wasn't a second chance. It was a new ground floor. A week later, I walked into my new office, real wood on the desk, coffee machine that didn't scream, my name already etched on the door. I set my bag down, opened my laptop, and let the skyline shimmer through glass untouched by anyone else's fingerprints. The assistant, my assistant, knocked softly and placed a fresh cup of coffee beside me. No sugar, just sharp and clean. I held it for a moment, breathing in the steam, letting it anchor me. And then, almost without thinking, I whispered to the quiet room, "This is why women can't lead." Tell that to the 120 millimeter platform you just lost. No applause followed, no cinematic soundtrack swelled. The victory wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It breathed, steady and sure, in the authority of being exactly where I belonged, without having to raise my voice. Isn't the sharpest revenge the kind that doesn't even raise its voice?